Taste the Mediterranean through March 19th at Whole Foods Market. Save on animal welfare certified bone and beef short ribs, sustainable wild-caught sockeye salmon, and more. Find sales on Parmigiano Reggiano, charcuterie and ground lamb. Grab an olive boule bread from the bakery. Plus, wines from the Mediterranean start at just $8.99. Taste the Mediterranean now at Whole Foods Market. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly.
This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Goalie Ashwa Gummies. You can find them at goalie.com. Use promo code the Show Up Dad Foundation to get 10% off your order. Zenderance Active Wellness and Sports Nutrition. Their products are designed to maximize your health. At Zenderance, they strive to support and have a positive impact on the wellness of every hardworking dad. Use my code the Show Up Dad and get 10% off your next purchase. For more info, go to www.zenderance.com. Tall Man Equipment, standing taller than the rest of the competition in lineman tools since 1952. Give them a follow at www.tallmanequipment.com. And last but not least, Adam Lane Smith. He is an attachment specialist who helps people to heal, connect, and build. Use my promo code SHOW, spelled S-H-O-W, for a 50% discount on his attachment bootcamp course. Thank you. Welcome to the Show Up Dad podcast, where our mission is to improve the well-being of children by increasing the proportion of children growing up with an involved, responsible, and committed father. The Show Up Dad Foundation is a 501c3 organization that encourages dad to become more than just a paycheck. Today's guest is BJ Foster. He has been married to his wife, Elizabeth, for almost 17 years. He is the father of two, a boy and a girl. He is the director of content for Family First, which is a nonprofit organization on a mission to provide parenting, marriage, and relational truth that helps people love their family well and gives them a greater hope for the future. BJ utilizes his experience in the corporate world, politics, nonprofits, with over 15 years of working with adolescents. Welcome to our show, brother.
Hey, David. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Well, like always, I want to just kind of open up with you talking about your own family dynamic, BJ, and what you saw growing up and what you were shown and how that affected you and stuff like that, if you don't mind.
Great. So I grew up, I was the youngest of four kids. I have three older sisters, so I kind of grew up with kind of like four moms.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was, I think that's probably the biggest dynamic that I dealt with was, three older sisters who were kind of paving the way for me. We lived in a lot of different areas, mainly the Northeast. I kind of grew up in the Philadelphia area, New England. Two parents that were married for the duration of my childhood. My dad passed away when I was 24. We were probably your typical family, I think. We laughed plenty. We fought plenty. There were good things. There was dysfunction here and there. I think one of the biggest things, my dad was, we were close. I would say we were definitely close. He struggled with alcoholism, and that was kind of, I think, a big part of my life as well. So I had two parents that were very loving and involved. And then three older sisters who I'm also close with and have always been close with, continue to be close with. So that gives you a little background. I was into athletics. I was baseball, soccer player mainly, a little bit of basketball. Yeah, we moved around, so I know what it's like to be the new kid. And that can be difficult. I was sort of your middle of the road kid, not like Not a big nerd, not super popular, just kind of right there in the middle.
Hmm.
Kind of,
The
right there, kind of like sort of, I would say probably respected, I guess. Yeah, that kind of gives you a little bit of background on me.
Hmm. Now, you said your father was an alcoholic.
Mhm.
What type of effects did that have on your family that you saw?
There was, I mean, he was highly functional,
Hmm.
but, in terms of effects on our family, it was,
Hmm.
I can tell you the effect on me. It was, he would drink. My dad was, he was very, like when he was sober, he was quiet. He
Hmm.
was funny, but quiet. When he would drink, he'd be the life of the party. He would be the person that everybody was kind of drawn to.
Hmm.
And For me, it was, uh, I always sort of lived with this anxiety of what's he going to do? You know, he could get very frustrated and he could yell.
Hmm.
So it was there was a lot of, he became very unpredictable, and so it was just sort of like, okay, is he gonna, he wouldn't be like a violent person, but it
Yeah.
was one of those things where at 1 a.m. he could be, you know rustling around with a lot of pots and pans, kind of yelling about, trying to find a pan to make sausage. And I was just kind of like, okay. And then are my parents going to get into an argument because of it? And that would bring anxiety and stress. So I do have, some of the characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. I kind of, um, uh, there are little things that, like, one of the characteristics that I figured out later is, like, adult children of alcoholics will lie about things that don't even matter. Like,
Mm.
I'll be telling a story and I'll change a small detail without even thinking about it.
Hmm.
And I think that's just a little bit because, like, you're sort of used to sort of lying to project a kind of an image about your family. And so I found that out. I'm like, why did I'd be asking myself questions. Why did I change that detail? Like, it doesn't even matter. And I think it's just because you're so sort of used to saying small lies or whatever, that it kind of becomes a part of your nature. So I've had to kind of work on that. Like, I'll even tell a story and I'll change a small detail, and I'll tell the person, I'm like, that detail's not true. It was this. I don't even know why I changed that. And so
Hmm.
that got me into the habit of being completely about the truth. My sister, one of them is, they take themselves incredibly seriously sometimes. I don't do that, but my sister does. And so
Uh-huh.
we've had that discussion. Like, you make fun of her and she gets very upset about it, because she just takes herself really seriously. And so those are some of the ways. But I think the biggest way at the time was, having friends over was always like this. Gosh, I don't know if I really want to open my doors and bring somebody in here to this, because I'm worried about how they'll perceive it, how they'll understand it.
Mm.
And will they go and speak badly about my family? And
Mm.
so, so all of that was, again, he was very functional. It would just kind of be like Friday, he'd just get the scotch out and drink until 1 in the morning. Um, and so it was a little bit like that. It wasn't like he was falling down or couldn't hold a job or that kind of thing, or that it was an all the time deal, but it certainly at times did get, there were times when we had to go pick him up from a bar because he was, had gone out,
Hmm.
and we were worried about him. Kind of, is he going to drive? Is he going to, that kind of thing. So yeah, it definitely had it brought anxiety, and there's been plenty of things I've had to work through because of it.
Hmm. No, for sure. I didn't have the experience like that with my own father.
Mhm.
In fact, the running joke was we wish he would drink. You know what I mean? Because the guy was just out of control, just super militant, just
Yeah.
hard man.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did drink, he was completely different. He was lovey-dovey. He wanted to hug you, and you're my son, and yada yada, right? But on the other hand, my father or my grandfather, my mom's dad, he was a functioning alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like if he didn't drink, he would get the shakes and stuff like that. But he was so nice, one
Yeah.
of the nicest men ever. And I spent a lot of time with that man. And I saw him how he would have to hide and because it was embarrassment. He wasn't allowed to drink in the house. My grandma didn't allow it. So he would go and act like he was working on his truck, and he'd have the hood open, and he would have old Milwaukee beer in there, you know what I mean, sitting in the radiator and stuff like that. And he'd be cracking open a beer and just acting like that, and we'd be laughing and talking, and he'd give me a little sip here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and so I saw that, and I battled with alcohol myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was crazy because I look back and I'm like, well, my dad was never an alcoholic. So where did I learn that? Who am I emulating? And then it clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, my grandpa, because that's who I associated with. I
Mm-hmm.
had a more of a connection with my grandpa than I did my own father, right?
Yeah.
So I saw how that kind of transpired into my own life, and even with my brother. So it holds true to say that what walks in fathers runs in sons, in a sense, you know what I'm saying? Because I started drinking heavily as well, and
Yeah.
I had to stop. But that's interesting. That's interesting to see how you talked about how you had this level of shame, you
Mm.
know, coming home and afraid of what people were going to think. I remember my mother saying the same thing, that she was always afraid of bringing her friends home to see her dad because she didn't know if he was going to be passed out on the couch
Yeah.
or whatever. You know what I mean? So I can sympathize with you on that for sure. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Well, and it's, I mean, one of the big things I think, one of the big reasons I think a lot of people become alcoholics is they're trying to numb kind of their own pain and their own, and that's one of the things that generation I think did a lot is they went to the bottle to talk about their pain. I think our generation, we get into counseling, we get into therapy if
Yeah.
we're strong enough. And so that's one of the big things with my dad. Just didn't feel loved by his parents, and so therefore let's numb the pain with alcohol instead of kind of dealing with it. And I could very easily take the anxiety that I grew up with and then inflict that on my kids in some way if I didn't figure out how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So this stuff can be very generational down the line. You can have people that are that are very abusive alcoholics that inflict this terrible stuff on their kids, and then their kids say, well, I'm never going to be like him and I'm never going to drink an ounce. And maybe they don't, but maybe they inflict the same type of militant harshness on their own kids even though they never drank. And so that's why it's so important, I think, to
Mm-hmm.
kind of unpack all this stuff and how it affected us, and so that we can kind of move forward in a healthy way with our own kids.
No, I agree with you 100% because pain that is not dealt with is transferred.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that exactly what you're saying in a lot of guys. They become workaholics. They may
Right.
not be an alcoholic, but they become a holic of some sort.
Yeah.
um so yeah, we definitely got to deal with our pain and the past trauma and just face it. Why do you think guys don't face that though? Like, what have you seen?
I think sometimes they don't even know, and they don't even know what to do with it. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's well, I'm supposed to be a strong male and I'm supposed to, buck up and deal with it. And we a lot of times struggle with just kind of the feeling of feeling vulnerable and what that feels like. I don't like to dig into my feelings because it makes me feel weak. And that's like the ultimate thing. That's like the ultimate thing that a man can just never be perceived as or identified as weak. And
Mm-hmm.
it makes them feel weak to kind of open up some of these things and say, this hurt me, this affected me. Like I think we get a lot of guys who are like, nothing affects me. And I just keep pushing on, and I'm going to overcome, and I'm going to overcome that mountain. So but to stop and to tell you the truth, it takes more strength to open up and really kind of dig into your pain and to actually say this thing affected me than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's why a lot of guys they just don't want to dive into it. Maybe they don't even want to deal with what they've done, the wrongs that they've done. They don't want to kind of deal with. We kind of want to walk through life very self-righteous. We kind of see ourselves as the hero, and the hero does all the right things and says all the right things and overcomes the mountain. We don't kind of share, weakness or how something has hurt us. Even with our friendships,
Yeah.
when do we ever do that? Sit down with our friends and say, hey, this is bothering me. This is something that's really hurting me. If you're in a group like that, where you're talking with a group of friends, guy friends, and you're sharing past hurts that you've had and things you're working through, you're definitely in the minority.
Yeah, for sure. No, we created a men's group for the Show Up Dad on Facebook for that specific reason, and it's a chat first, because I do understand that people don't want to be seen and they're more apt to not speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If they're actually like on a Zoom link or whatever. So we have the chat, and it took off pretty well. We did it for a week. With some of the concepts that we got from the All Pro Dad, and we took each one of those concepts one a day, and we utilized it in that chat. And you'll be surprised how many people are just open and receptive to just join in on that chat and just start talking about their feelings and stuff like that. It's pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. Well, when you open up those gates, I mean, you realize it's that guys are hungry for it when they start doing it. It's a relief to just kind of let it all out, and rather than kind of keeping it all bottled up like we've got it all together. That's kind of one of the biggest lies I think we all live, is that we all feel like we need to have it all together, or just fake it until you get there, rather than just being authentic and saying, this is what I'm struggling with, this is what I'm dealing with, or this is kind of the reality of my situation. This is how far I've gotten, and I'm stuck and I can't get out, and or I can't make it any further. If we could kind of live life with that kind of authenticity and that kind of honesty, all of a sudden, I think we make tremendous jumps in our life and our relationships.
Mm-hmm. It's crazy that you said that, because earlier you talked about how adult children of alcoholics, children tend to lie or embellish,
Yeah.
right? Or projecting an image about their family.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's true with people of trauma as well, not just alcoholism, but if you get surrounded with trauma, you know what I mean? And if you had something that's traumatic in your life, in your family, whatever, right? If that's one of the contributing factors to us not opening up, us as men projecting that, hey, everything's okay.
Yeah. And trauma is one of those things. And trauma, if you've been hurt that deeply, I mean, there are a lot of different responses to trauma, but one of the biggest ones is just total lockdown. Like, because you've been hurt so deeply, and sometimes it's just the body goes into, there's a great book, hard read, called The Body Keeps the Score. Terrific read, that goes into trauma. But where you just lock down, you've been hurt so deep, it's just kind of like you Fort Knox it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different responses that could be to trauma, but yeah, like it's trauma. I think one of the things that you experience when you experience trauma is that this is a very unsafe world, and putting myself out there to be hurt, I can't do it. The person who's faced that trauma, it's like, I can't do it. And trauma is very big in that it's kind of like your body relives it. It relives the emotion like it's happening in real time. And so if you're for lack of a better analogy, if you're a wounded animal and you feel like you're being wounded right there. Like the incident is happening right there. You're gonna lock down, you're gonna shut down, and we can't get into this. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I could definitely see that. But trauma is like a whole, it seems like a whole other level of,
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on with the body and stuff going on with the mind that it takes a professional to kind of unlock.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely saw that with my wife when she got sick from Lyme.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just the trauma that surrounded her sickness created her in her own body to her body stopped accepting certain foods. She was down to like, I think 10 ingredients that she could eat, and she was literally starving to death because her body was in so much trauma from the Lyme that was in her body that it started firing off, and she became allergic to everything, smells, everything, you know what I mean? And her body started telling her, hey, this is foreign, this is foreign, this is foreign. It, went into this like protective mode, which was actually being detrimental to her, kind of like an allergy. She
Mm-hmm.
had this mast cell activation because of this thing, and
Amazing.
it's amazing to see how your body responds and your brain responds to trauma,
Yeah.
so pretty crazy. I wanted to ask you, BJ, so you do all this great work, right? How did you get involved with this mission to help families to love each other well? How did you step into that?
It was kind of the long road. My career has been very, if you saw my resume, it's the most eclectic thing you've ever seen, mainly because I just didn't know what direction I should go. Is one of those things where you're sort of average at a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
but not really specialized. And, I was, I volunteered with an organization called Young Life, which is an outreach to teenagers and middle schoolers. I did that for like 10 years, just volunteering while I was an office manager for a ministry. I tried to be a financial advisor for a little while and was a dismal failure at that. And then I went on Young Life staff. So I worked on staff for 4 years with teenagers, middle schoolers, and was actually a chaplain for the local football team.
Mm.
And the mom of the team, the team mom who kind of organized a lot of the stuff for the team, was a woman named Susan Merrill, who she and her husband Mark formed Family First, which is the organization over All Pro Dad and iMom,
Mm-hmm.
which is the motherhood component of our organization. Well, so she would come in and she would hear me speak. I'd go into the locker room. I'd speak every Friday morning to about 60, in a very smelly locker room with 60 football players, and I normally would tell stories about stuff my kids were doing. My kids at the time were like 1 and 2 years old. So I was in the dark ages of parenthood, which that's what I call that era. Because you never sleep and everything is just so new and different and hard. So I tell these stories about my kids, and she said she wanted to hire me for All Pro Dad, and I wasn't interested in the time,
Mm.
but eventually came around to it that might be the direction that I need to head. And so one of the things that I realized is, if you look at my entire life and career, while I did a ton of different stuff, I always had a passion for being a husband and being a father. That's something I always wanted to do. So in 2014, I was offered the job as the content manager for All Pro Dad. And so that's kind of how that came about. But really, I sort of feel like it was years in the making that really this is kind of where my passion lies. It's family life, it's relationships, it's marriage relationships, it's being a dad. It's always something I had a passion for. It's always something that I wanted. And
Mm-hmm.
I got married later, so I kind of had to come to grips with it. Maybe this is not going to happen, but fortunately it did.
No, that's awesome to see that it transpired like that through all your different levels of experience. You're able to grab that like your tool bag
Mhm.
and utilize it to what you're doing now and finding your purpose, which is awesome. I think a lot of times, from what I've heard from another psychologist, a guest of ours,
Mhm.
he said that when a man loses his purpose, that's when depression sets in. So we
Mhm.
all have a purpose. You know what I mean? And it's up to us to find that purpose. That's the way God designed us. He designed us to problem solve,
Mhm.
and a lot of times when we go into these problem solving modes and our wives don't want us to problem solve and they shut us down, they just want us to listen.
Mhm.
We get offended by that because we feel like we can't contribute anything because that's the way we're wired. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that starts a lot of fights, and that goes into a whole different realm. But I thought that was kind of interesting to say that, about purpose.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah, and I think that was a lot of some of my biggest struggle in my 20s and 30s was, okay, what is my purpose? And thinking, well, maybe I found it, maybe but I
Mm-hmm.
think ultimately it's this helping folks with relationships. I think that's the biggest thing. And even when I
Mm-hmm.
was a financial advisor, it was, well, let me help them in their with their finances so that they can grow in their relationships and do the things that they wanted. So I've always wanted to be kind of a helper,
Mm-hmm.
with anything that I've been doing. So this is I think the funnest for me is
Mm-hmm.
helping dads be better dads, helping men be better husbands. Yeah, so that's, I think, my passion. So it is passion and purpose, I think, are huge, and I've never felt more fulfilled than I have in the past 8 years.
No, that's good to hear. That's definitely good to hear. So you mentioned relationships. What do you see as a key factor to having a good relationship?
Oh my gosh, I think that's a I think, restate that. Do you mind
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, what do you think contributes to having good relationships?
yeah.
I should say.
I think, number one, you have got to get to the bottom of your own stuff. We all
Mm-hmm.
see the world through a certain filter, and our childhood and our experiences uh, have profoundly influenced how we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we, and this particularly, I think, pertains to parenthood, when we feel like we are loved, then our cup is full.
Mm-hmm.
And so we live life, from a positive standpoint, and therefore we can then give. If we don't feel loved, then we live life at a deficit. So,
Mm-hmm.
we kind of, and then therefore we're trying to fill that deficit. And unfortunately, we fill that deficit a lot of times with unhealthy stuff, with
Mm-hmm.
stuff that I think hurts us the most. So if you're approaching a relationship and you don't feel a sense of love, then you're going to try to take and get from the relationship as much as you can.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to try to get attention. You're going to try to get some feeling of affirmation, and you need all you come into the relationship from a point of need. I need from you. I need this from you. I need,
Mm-hmm.
rather than I'm coming to this relationship and I'm giving. I come from a full place and I'm giving. Okay, so getting to the bottom of your hurt so that you can unpack and kind of dismantle, like, okay, I don't feel loved by my parents.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I don't feel a sense of belonging. I don't feel a sense of security. Therefore, I'm going out and finding security in other things. And if you're trying to find security and all of that stuff in your spouse, then they're never going to quite meet your expectations, and they're not going to meet your needs. Friendships the same way. They're not going to fill all the things that you're wanting them to fill, because that's not never the intention of any of that stuff. So do you come to a relationship from a full heart and a full place, knowing your identity, knowing you're loved, knowing you mentioned purpose, knowing your sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you come with a full place, then you can give to that relationship. And I think that's what makes it healthy. If you come at a deficit,
Mhm.
then you're going to be trying to get, and
Mhm.
it's never going to quite meet that need. I hope that makes sense.
No, no, for sure. I heard something like that this Sunday, as a matter of fact, where I was listening to one of our female pastors, and she was talking about how being in the cycle of expecting and underfunding leads to resentment and bitterness. You know, if you're always expecting and then you're not even funding into that,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to burn out your spouse. Okay. She's going to become bitter. She's going to have resentment. And then what happens? That resentment then in turn sours your marriage. You know,
Right.
one of the visuals that she gave us was that you have this vine. Okay. Wine and vinegar comes from the same fruit.
Mm.
What depends on what makes what is how it was treated, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty awesome visual. You know what I mean? It's up to us and how we speak, how we make that connection. How are we treating that person? Are we underfunding them? You know what I mean? Are we expecting something from them and not giving back to them? You know what I mean? Relational, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Absolutely.
now, since you've been started on this work and this mission to help families and stuff like that, what do you see like today's family do you see that today's family dynamic is getting better or worse with the culture?
Boy, I don't know if I can necessarily say it's getting better. I think there are a couple things cultural wise that there are a couple of concerns I think that I have.
Mhm.
Mainly, younger folks aren't getting married. They're getting married less.
Mhm.
Um, they're more living together. Um, and sort of starting a family that way.
Mhm.
And we're seeing less divorces because of it, but we're also seeing less marriages
Mhm.
because of it. So in that sense, it's like, okay, has it gotten better? I don't know if it's getting better. I definitely don't see it getting better. Is it getting worse? I don't know if it's getting worse. Um, but I do think there is something about making the decision to get married and then starting a family after that, I
Mhm.
think starts everything in a more solid place. Culturally, I don't know. I saw this question pop up, when you and I were talking earlier. You said you were going to ask it, and I thought, I don't know how I'm going to answer that one. And I think
Mhm.
maybe it's one I need to think about a little bit more.
Mhm.
But primarily, that's the first thing I thought of is, like people aren't getting married
Mhm.
like they used to. And I think that puts our families in less solid ground.
Mhm.
And that's maybe where I would leave it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think families are
I
getting weak?
no, from what I've seen, you're absolutely right. I've seen both ends. Okay. I've seen here in California, a lot of people that I surround myself with are young families,
Mhm,
very young families. They're excited about marriage, they're excited to start their life and all that stuff. Okay. So I see that a lot, but I also see the other portion of it where they're happy about having children and stuff like that, but they haven't got married as well. And I agree with you when you say that you start yourself on an unstable ground. Okay.
mhm,
You figure when you have that piece of paper, right, between you, okay, when you're married and you have this contract with this person, you're bound to that person.
mhm,
You know, there's a level of expectancy between both you and your spouse, right?
mhm,
And with that being said, I think a lot of times people are afraid to commit because of the fear of what could possibly happen. They're surrounding themselves in this anxiety around something that was supposed to be beautiful, right? As marriage, it's work, but it was supposed to be meant for you guys to join together and work and help each other out, right? But they are surrounded by this anxiety of the what if, living in the land of what if. What if it doesn't work out? What if this?
mhm.
What if that, right? So that whole entire fear right there is just stopping them from stepping into
Yeah,
something that is amazing, you
yeah,
know. And like I said, it's not easy. I'm not here trying to project that marriage was perfect for us as well, you know. We had our ups and downs, horrible stuff, and I was completely messed up, And, I had to learn from my own mistakes. And every day I thank God that I still have a family, you know?
Mm, hmm
So
hmm Yeah,
I,
and that's the thing that I think we underestimate how all of that affects our kids.
mhm,
If the relationship between the parents is unstable or less firm, even,
mhm,
um, it creates this anxiety underpinning, with them, where they're just sort of living every like that. One of their biggest parts of security is knowing that their parents are going to be together. I'll never forget one of my mentors was saying that uh, he told a story about his son and how his son stepped out of line
mhm,
and he came down pretty firmly on him about it. And then he left the room and his mom said, "Hey, don't worry about your dad. Like, he just is feeling this way." And, and their son actually said to her, um, "Hey mom, I don't need you to be on my side
mhm.
with this." He said, "I need you to be on dad's side. Like, I'll be fine, but like I'll be the most fine if you and dad are together." And that's always reminded me, that has just been a great
Wow.
reminder to me about the security that parents together provide. And some of the folks that might be listening to this might be like, "Well, I'm divorced and great, I guess my kid
Mhm,
is going to be messed up." No, that's not the case. But you should do whatever you can possibly do to make that relationship with the kid's mom
mhm.
good. Because that is going to help save off a ton of security problems that kid is going to potentially have. So,
Man, I couldn't agree with you more. Even just when you were talking, I was thinking about some of the fights that me and my wife had.
mm,
And my daughter, who's the eldest, she witnessed.
mm,
And it's weird because she'd go to her room and listen to music, whatever, put her earphones and she wouldn't have to hear. But I noticed the impact in her in school. She started withdrawing. She started getting in trouble. She started doing all these things. And then it wasn't until later on that I realized that, man, it's that instability in the family dynamic, the chaotic family that we are creating that is causing all this turmoil in her,
yeah.
and kids have the ability to um, take all that and put it on themselves, right? And then
Hmm.
think that they're the problem. Mom and dad are fighting because I'm the problem, right? And it's totally unfair for them. We're supposed to create a home that is to be safe, right? Our home's supposed to be a safe place for our children, and when they're growing up in a home that's not safe, they're going to seek elsewhere. They're going to start
Hmm.
going and getting in trouble. They're going to start seeking other avenues to fill that security. I know I did.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that that's possibly one of the areas that might be improving. I think the parents today are probably more open to kind of talking with their kids about,
mhm,
just letting their kids talk and letting them pour out their hearts a little bit and not immediately jumping in and telling them what to do and that kind of thing, or just kind of, making it all about rules and regulation, that they have a desire to connect with their kids. And, I see maybe some improvements there. But that's the thing. I think in some ways we improve, and in other ways
mhm,
we need to bring back some of the other stuff. Like, um, kids they're much more protected these days,
yeah,
which has its benefits and also its negatives. Kids today have, the kids coming out of the workforce today have expectations, and um, they expect immediate advancement,
mhm,
without potential working for years and earning it. So some of that. So uh, I do think, if I would push back on one thing, that I hear a lot.
mhm.
I hear a lot that kids today are weak or they're snowflakes or whatever. That to me, I don't think is true.
No,
Um, I don't think that at all. And and in so many ways, being a teenager, I think, is much harder. If I had the choice to be a teenager when I was a teenager in the early 90s, or now, I would definitely choose when I was, because to have all of our lives online, and every mistake that we potentially make is on video and could be put online and posted by anybody, is just a really difficult thing for these kids to be growing up in. And so I think if there's one improvement, I would say some things some of us older generation folks could do, it's to stop dumping on the younger generation, because
Man.
it immediately loses our credibility. And if you want to speak into the lives of young people, stop calling them snowflakes, stop calling them weak, stop saying, oh, if this generation were only a little bit tougher. They're a lot tougher than we give them credit for.
No, I can't agree with you more. I get to see it from both ends. Just being an instructor, I hear the same things over and over again. Oh, these kids are weak. They're emotional. They're lazy and all that stuff. And that's completely opposite from what I see. I mean, these guys are hard-working individuals. I mean, I worked hard coming up in the trade, right, with some burly men. But man, these guys are working some outrageous hours that I wouldn't even want to work, and so they definitely have a resilience and they are tough. I just think that they're more in touch with their emotional side.
Yeah.
And
which is not a bad thing.
it's not a bad
That's
thing.
a great thing.
Exactly. It is. It's definitely a great thing. I think that the generation that is making these accusations, and that'd be my generation, your generation, we're uncomfortable with emotions because that's what we're shown, right? So then we project our own insecurities on them when they're doing something different. I think that's what it boils down to, is we're projecting our own insecurities on them because they're doing it different. That's all, with that being said, what does the future of the traditional family look like? What are you thinking about 20 years or so?
Boy, yeah, that's another big one. I think the traditional family is gonna, if you had to pin me down, I think the traditional family is probably going to survive and thrive, but it's, there are all sorts of other definitions of, family that are going to come into the fray. But I do think, the future of the traditional family is, I think it's an important part of our society. I think it's going to continue to be there. I do think that this marriage component will show its effects. There will be consequences to that.
Yes.
And I don't know the full extent of what those consequences are going to be in 20 years, but we're going to see it, I think. And with a lot of these things, I think we're a little bit like a pendulum. We kind of think, well, this will fix a lot of the stuff if we just do this. And then we realize that when we swing out, it creates a lot of problems. There might be some solutions with it, and it creates some problems, and then it swings back the other way. Yeah, I don't know if I'm really answering the question the way that you think, but I do think that the marriage component, I think, is going to have probably the biggest consequence that I can see to it. It'll be interesting to see if that pendulum swings back. But I don't know. What do you see?
I base it off of what Carl Zimmerman said. The Harvard law professor, he wrote a paper in 1942 where he discussed the family dynamic, right? The falling apart, okay, the atomistic age. And I think that's where we're at today. He said that every single major civilization had one thing in common. Okay, every civilization that was great. That was like the Romans, Babylonians, all that stuff, right? And he said it was the traditional family. Okay, there was a man, a woman, children, yada, yada, right? He said that those great nations all had one thing in common. They all fell apart within when that traditional family
Yeah.
came apart, right? So I think, as you're saying as well, as it's absolving and the traditional family is changing and morphing and going away from its roots, I think we're going to have all these problems that are going to be developing.
Yeah.
And I am not, I am a optimistic, you know what I mean? I definitely am a glasses half full type of guy, but I see that if we don't start making the change, if we don't start educating people about the importance of families and really getting on the ball and not only just saying it, but living it, right? There's not going to be a change. It's going to go bad.
Yeah.
We didn't get here overnight. This has been a steady flow, right? So I think it's up to us, the people like us who are aware of this situation and stuff like that, to be able to influence the younger generation so they can start making the changes in their family. Because it's I hate to say it like this, but it's too late for us, right?
Mm.
It's going to be what we do now that's going to affect the third, fourth, fifth generation later on, and hopefully for a greater change. That's what I firmly believe.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, we did a study a number of years ago with inmates, and just asked them, okay, how many of you grew up with a father? And 85% did not grow up with a dad. And I think that's one of the things that we're working towards is tackling this whole epidemic of fatherlessness. And in fact, in the state of Florida, we're going to be starting a huge fatherhood initiative, just kind of educating people on this whole deal, like how do we be great fathers, because of the importance of that role in the lives of kids and the generations that you're talking about. And I talked to a neighbor of mine who works with prison inmates, and he's affirmed it, that 90% grew up without a dad. So yeah, as much as we can affirm these roles, as much as we can encourage strong, foundational marriages that kind of like should start the family. That's where the family should grow out of, this covenantal relationship that's really strong and solid, and everything kind of builds from there. In terms of the family, you're right. It's definitely going to be more solid in terms of make our whole culture and civilization more solid. If that breaks down, we're in trouble. So that's what I think I'm hoping for, is if we continue to swing away from a traditional family, we're going to run into problems, and hopefully the pendulum will swing back. Hopefully it won't be a progression, and we don't end up like the Romans, who ultimately fell to the barbarians. So
no, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned the importance of a dad, right?
Yeah.
How important is that role? Like, why do you feel that the guys in the prison system felt like the role of a father wasn't important? Like,
Oh, they definitely feel like it was important. They just didn't grow up with one.
Okay.
And that's what it, like 90% of the men incarcerated grew up without a dad. Or grew up with a dad that was hurtful, abusive. And so that role of a father provides, I think, strength when it's done well. It provides strength to the family. It provides security to the family. I think there's nobody better. And when we talk about at All Pro Dad, sometimes people get offended. We talk about dads as leaders, as a leader in the home.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, particularly some women might think that we are creating a hierarchy with that. And it's really about men taking the first move, taking the initiative, carrying the moral weight of the family in terms of how they behave, what they model, not sitting back and being reactionary and just kind of taking life as it comes, but really being intentional day after day about being visionaries and, okay, where are we going? What do we want to be about in terms of are the characteristics of this family and as people? When a dad provides that really well, and it provides it in a loving way, it makes the entire household more secure, more full of life, more full of strength. I think particularly with kids get a sense of that they belong to something. They feel loved and cared for. They they just feel a sense of security, I think, in who they are. When a dad does that well. When a dad is not present, the opposite happens. Again, it goes back to, I think, that positive and negative. Are you living at a deficit? Or are you living at a fullness? And if you have a dad that is present, active, leading, loving, then you're going to feel a very solid part of all of that. You're going to feel like a solid human. I know where I come from. I know I'm loved and cared for. Therefore, because I feel like I'm loved and cared for, I can go out and now give to other people. When that's at a deficit, you see it all the time. So the guys who are incarcerated, they're trying to fill their lives with a whole lot of stuff that is negative. They're trying to take, they're trying to find stuff. Maybe they're even just numbing with drugs and alcohol, and they end up in prison that way. So sometimes it's not that extreme. I've gotten plenty of our comments are like, yeah, my husband walked out, my daughter's 20 years old and she's fine. And it's like, okay, that's awesome. I'm glad. Your daughter's in the minority of the stories out there. And then there were a million comments, there could be a million comments after that where people are like, oh my gosh, my dad walked out and I'm still working through it. I still don't feel like I'm loved. You talked about guys who are addicted to their careers. Many of them are striving for success because they never felt like their dad was proud of them or approved of them. And so, there's nothing that can mess a kid up like a dad. But on the flip side of that, there's nobody, again, I'm not trying to negate the role of the mom. Like, that's equally as important here. But boy, when a dad is present and invests, oh my gosh, there's so much health that comes out of it.
I agree with you, BJ, totally. I also see as well, just to cap off what you're saying, the importance of the father is the identity. I think that's what we're seeing now. Children don't even know their own identity.
Right.
Why? They're supposed to get that from their father. So that just goes to show how the importance of a father is. I mean, and a lot of these fathers aren't even gone. A lot of these fathers are present in the home. They're just tuned out. They're not being intentional, like you talked about. You know what I mean? They figure that, hey, I'm the breadwinner. I put a roof over your head. I've clothed you. That's all I need to do.
Right.
And that's our goal here at our foundation, is to let fathers know that you are more than just a paycheck.
Well, and imagine how different the world would be if more men took that on. Because I spoke with a group of New York Jets back in November, and one of the points that I said with them, I said, the fact that you're here wanting to be a good dad, the fact that you saw that this was an opportunity that you could come and even think about being a better dad, immediately puts you in the upper echelon of fathers. Because most men, we make financial plans so that we can retire well. We make plans for our careers. But how many dads actually take the time and put a plan together to being a good dad? Most don't have a clue of what that looks like, or wouldn't even know where to start, or don't even have a desire to start. But if more men did that, if more men took the time and initiative to kind of think, how can I train? How can I think? How can I take the initiative every day to be a great dad? that would change generation upon generation. And what kind of different society would we live in if even 80% of men out there took that seriously?
Mm-hmm. Man, that was awesome, man. I appreciate that, BJ. Once again, thank you for coming on here, for sharing all your wisdom with us and our audience. I know that it's going to bring a tremendous amount of value to them. BJ, I'd like to give you the opportunity now to, if people have questions or anything like that, how can they get a hold of you if you want to share that with our audience?
Yeah, if they just go to allprodad.com, they
Okay.
can subscribe to our daily play of the day. In fact, that's one of the ways, if you want to be a great dad, we send out a daily email every day that if you learn just one thing from that. But there's plenty of places where you can comment on the posts and I respond to it. And you could email, there's a place where they can email to allprodad and I get all of those. So they can do that. That's how they can get a hold of me. So
Awesome. Thank you once again, BJ, for coming on here and just bringing what All Pro Dad and Family First brings to the table. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
appreciate it, David. Thank you very much for having me.